So now we have a short presentations from everybody, from 3 people, about the scope of the workshop. So it's you first, Simon. I'll just set this up for you. And I guess we'll roll between the 3 of you and then have questions at the end. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. I'll keep it quick if I can. Also pay my respects to traditional owners and elders of the Bunurong country. Got the lovely sea country at Port Phillip Bay out to my right. Maybe you want to walk that way to dinner tonight along the beach. Got the beautiful Edithvale Seaford wetlands a kilometre over there, Ramsar internationally recognised site. So some beautiful country around here in Aspendale, in this place, in this room for since the 1990 IPCC report. People have come and talked about what was the predecessor of CMIP. So we have a continuous history here on this site of contributing to the CMIP models and every IPCC report in the modelling space. That comes from a group of 8 back in 1990 and a much larger group today. And just echoing those comments in the discussion just there, you can't turn it off and turn it back on again. If you turn it off, you lose it. I think, Andy, you're spot on with that comment there. National Environmental Science Program. Helen, you talked about bridging the gap between science and society in the WCRP context before. It's a really important part, I think, of what NESP is doing as well. I'm not going to give a talk on NESP, I don't have time, but we do have the Indigenous partnerships stuff, which is really important. We do have the climate adaptation stuff, which is really important. And we do have the foundational climate science capability that we're holding on to and developing the science, but always thinking about the pathway to impact, the bridging the gap between science and society. I think that's really important for us. There's a quote there, leading the further development of Australia's global climate model ACCESS. That comes out of the research scope for the Climate Systems Hub when the bids were called for. It's reflected in the activity outcomes of our funding agreement. It's one of 4 key line statements there. So the hub, the Climate Systems Hub for NESP, is really committed to the ACCESS modelling. It's really important. It's written in there. People have signed off on that. TILO has been leading up the projects. I won't go into detail of them, but we're continuing that through the life of the hub. Why do it if you're not going to go and get the icing on the cake at the end? This is like, and so many have come. There's 40 people in this room. There's nearly 40 online. So many people have come this time. This is really, really great community spirit. If I think back to previous CMIPs, we were on a shoestring here in Aspendale and on an oily rag, and there wasn't 80 people in the room. So this is a really great opportunity. And where am I going with this? Yeah, we're committed to it, and I think leading to this end path of going to CMIP. This is like the Australian Olympic team for climate modelling here having their pre-meeting before the Olympics, a long time before the Olympics, and we're going to CMIP7 and eventually we're going to go and get a medal at the IPCC and be recognised for that. So that's our pathway to impact through the modelling that we're carrying. I think it's really important for NESP. And yeah, just achieving impact is really important for the hub. Sustaining capability is really important, and I reflected on that at the start. You can't turn it off and turn it back on again. It's a continuing thing. You need specialised careers in the climate modelling going through. I know that's a kind of self-serving appeal, but given the importance of this work, given the way it coalesces us around a scientific community, I think it's really important to maintain that. Just want to finish by reiterating some of the conversation before, and I think it was Ramona, might have been Julie, I'm not sure. Coming out of this, it was Ramona, coming to a shared understanding. We've got a number of groups in the room. We've got agencies, CSIRO Bureau, we've got universities, we've got Centre of Excellence, we've got other partnerships represented, NCI, etc. Having a shared understanding when we talk to people like Catherine and Leanne and other people in the department about what the impact is. Having good answers to those questions is a really important thing. I think that we got to come together over the next 2 days and really drive towards that, because now is the time for conversations, now is the time for planning, and we need to have a shared understanding. So welcome everyone to Aspendale. This is where I live, and really glad to see you all here. Thank you.
Good. The brief was to give a bit of a background of where we've been and where we're going. So from the NCI's point of view, as many of you are very well aware, we've provided the underpinning infrastructure, I think, that's brought the collaboration around access models and other things for now quite some period of time. In fact, I'd say all up, more than 50% of the usage of NCI is really around climate, weather, system, geosciences. It's been the dominant thing now for quite some time, and there are other communities on NCI, but this is the flagship activity. And in fact, just yesterday, our NCI board approved the name of a flagship, which I'll lead around climate and weather and the geosciences, more generally to sort of recognise, no, we really need to coordinate and bring a few things together. So we've been dealing with CMIP from its original sort of fledgling, sort of the CMIP3 state, which some people in the room will remember how difficult that was to pull together, with sort of hard drives being shared around the country and corrupted in situ, or whatever, in transit and lost and all sorts of things. And then a big effort around CMIP5 as NCI was forming around a partnership that included SARO, Bureau, GA and the university sector badged under NCRESS to sort of make a proper platform for certain things. And a big driving force around that was climate and access model as it was, at the time. NCI is a foundation partner in the US System Grid Federation that came out of that sort of early fledgling state, with the DOE and NASA, UK, various European programs, and us, the only one in the south, as it were. And we continue that partnership and how to navigate that space for supporting WCRP activities, in particular around climate, but other things, as well. We host the National Repository of Definitive Data. That includes the international data come in, the input data that we can model off, and the generated data set so that we can compare, the important variables and analyse that. We host the Australian coupled models. It is the platform. We provide a lot of infrastructure around that to make it accessible and sort of democratised as best that we can, across the community, up to conditions and managing licenses and so on, with Met Office considerations, and how do you hold that infrastructure together. So the codes are all run on the supercomputer. It's significant and several generations. And indeed, last time, many may not be aware of just how much work was put in to understanding how to transition between supercomputers on the code base as we went through different technology shift. It was right in the middle of a CMIP run that we did that, and there was various people on the coding side across the various centres in NCI to actually unpick that for a long period of time to make that a stable transition between infrastructures. So we manage also a range of these climate and weather environments, and particularly hosting this, the Met Office software system and repository, and making that a stable base. And it's an extremely complex system of how to manage that, and we manage that sort of well over time and scalably, and it requires a lot of interaction on the NCI between data, cloud systems and the supercomputer itself to pull that together. And it's no mean technical feat, and now there's more players to help in that space, as there was before, with CSIRO and CLEX, probably the Centre of Excellence in Climate System Science, as it was at the time, and Bureau of Meteorology, all coming together to try and work out how do we make a stable community environment. One thing that was unusual, I'd have to say, in the international sphere for what we did for CMIP in the past, is that we not only hosted the data and distributed the data internationally and shared it, but we provided environment directly on the supercomputer for analysing the data. Most people overseas or whatever had to just click and download bits and pieces of the data, which was pretty tough work. On the NCI, we changed that model after listening to some of the community feedback and the advantage that we had of being in a proper supercomputer centre to pull that together and make a data analysis environment, which has to be said is enormously successful, so successful, of course, that the cloud providers know this is the way you do things. You co-locate compute and data, and all of the network protocols actually don't sort of work so well when you're trying to do this sort of cutting edge, deep work, and analysing data. So there's a lot of work around that. We've clicked off the bottom of the slide there somehow. We support a lot of national model activity, which includes now the National Partnership for Climate Projections, the ACESS, the ACCESS-NRI, the Centre of Excellences, many of them under different badges of names, including current ones and the future one under Christian with Climate for the 21st Century and BOM and CSIRO. This is a lot of different activities that go on. So the bit that got clicked off on the bottom of the slide was what's going on then for CMIP7. Well, there's a few things there. We're going to continue to do all of this stuff. We're going to, because we need to support the community of this national infrastructure base. There's the new techniques coming forward, like as Ben Gonvenzi mentioned, in machine learning, and what do we do with the technology base, and how do we deal with all of this infrastructure? So we've support and will continue to support as best we can the new analysis environments and make them possible. But my last point on this, and it comes to part of the planning around things like CMIP7, is infrastructure doesn't just live on cool science, it lives off funding. And that's just the baseline. It lives off funding. And whether we have a CMIP7 model or not, of course we should have one, but whether we have one or not, people want to analyse the data, they want to downscale the data. That is infrastructure that goes well beyond a CMIP7, and it permeates across NCRIS and DQ. And we have had historically a problem in who's funding what and who's responsible for it under NCRIS and DQ or its predecessors as well. And as many of you know, I've championed this case for a long period of time that we need stable infrastructure, computing advanced infrastructure with confidence around particularly managing the data, how we interact with our international colleagues around certain things, which has been a missing component. So it's an important one that I want to mention as we go forward. NCRIS is running a process at the moment to have a look at what's the next data compute infrastructure going forward. There's only a certain amount of dollars. As we know, supercomputing requires more and more to build the better models. To manage this data is not easy as well in terms of the capacity and sort of managing that infrastructure. And there is an alternative model, and the alternative model doesn't work very well, for this community, which is you try and distribute it out, in a very unclear, sort of fashion. So it's going to take quite a concerted effort to make sure our planning is right around where are we going with the models. And also there's been a lot of awareness building, I think, within DQ of where do they play and how to support the infrastructure, going forward. And there's some key questions there. They're not very easy in terms of capacity planning and all sorts of things, but that's the part of the conversation we're in. So anyway, I'm very supportive of our workshop here today. Andy.
Okay, so thank you all for coming along today. I just wanted to say a few words on behalf of ACCESS-NRI as to why we're all here and what we hope to get out of this workshop. And to do so, I think I'll start by trying to explain what ACCESS-NRI is and what we hope to do. Of course, we weren't here for CMIP6 or 5 or 3. We're a pretty new organisation and we're still finding our feet a little bit, but we do have a pretty clear mission, and that mission is around providing collaborative research infrastructure. That's what NCRIS is all about. Most NCRIS facilities, of course, focus on the hardware, ACCESS-NRI focuses on the software and we leave Ben to deal with the hardware for us. But I want to make the key point that we're not funded to deliver the projections. So the existence of ACCESS-NRI does not mean that CMIP will be done automatically for you, okay? So we have to be very clear about that. We are not here to do CMIP7. That's not our job. Just as we don't do research per se, we also don't do weather forecasting. That's the BOM's job. But we do contribute to the community. We contribute to model development, and we contribute to the data analysis and the tools around the models. The way we plan to make those contributions on the model development side is not by going it alone, but by partnering with the community. And so that's really why we wanted this workshop to happen. It's because last year I was asking a few people what's going to happen with CMIP7, do we know? No one really knew exactly what the plan is. In past years I've been a little bit critical that perhaps decisions were made at the last minute. NCI was left to pick up the storage at the last minute very generously. And the proposal around CMIP was not done strategically. So hopefully this workshop is going to be the beginning of changing that for CMIP7. And my hope is that we're going to find more of a community approach to CMIP7 than we did for CMIP6. And that's, as Simon said, it's great to see so many of you here in the room. I think we also need the resources to match our ambition. To do that, we need to know what our ambition is. And in fact, what we really need is we need the options that Catherine spoke about. We need to know what our possibilities are. You know, one possibility is we just take the same models and rerun them, and that's our CMIP7 contribution. Are we happy with that? What are the pros and cons of doing that? I think we need to discuss both our ambition and the resources in the same conversation. I don't expect this to be the end of the discussion today and tomorrow. I think it's going to be ongoing. In the future, we'll probably have to have more detailed discussions about exactly what things look like. And my hope is, particularly today, we can stay fairly high level, and maybe tomorrow we'll have a few more detailed discussions, but today is going to be more high level and thinking about what our science goals are, what our societal goals are, etc.